people in national media are already pretty down on Missouri just because of their performances against teams that, I had mentioned have maybe not actually been top 25 teams like Boston College and teams that don't really have athletes like Vanderbilt. So Missouri's already kind of down in the national opinion. So like if they go and they play well against a Texas A&M team that does have athletes that they got talent on that team. Whether that talent is going to translate to game days is a different story, but they've got talent. They've got dudes on that roster. It could really open the eyes for a lot of people.
Thanks for listening to KC Sports Network, proudly presented by Emprise Bank. If you're thinking about starting a business or know someone who is, check out Emprise Bank's SBA loans. It's always good to know your options, and they can be your partner in possible.
Hello and welcome into this week's edition of Mizzou. That's Who, your podcast from Missouri Athletics here on KC Sports Network. I'm Tucker Franklin, joined as always by Maggie Johnson. I have a super good episode for you guys today. Really excited for what we got cooking for you. Billy Liucci of TexAgs.com joins us. He'll join us later on the show. Maggie and I are here to talk Mizzou first before we talk some Ags there with Billy. But Maggie, how you doing? How was your bye week?
My bye week was great. I had some friends in town, just kind of hung out, watched a little bit of football, watched that Bama-Georgia game, which was crazy, absolutely crazy.
Great game.
One of my friends that came and visited, she lives in Nashville, Tennessee, but she played soccer at the University of Alabama, so there was no way we were losing it, and then not watching it. And then the other two friends live in Southern Georgia, so yeah, it was a fun one we couldn't miss, and it lived up to the hype.
Yeah, it was a really good weekend in college football. You know what? Let's just start there. Let's just talk about the weekend in college football. As Missouri was on a bye week, some things do happen that help Missouri move up in the AP poll. They're now a top 10 team. I've heard a lot of people on Twitter say they're not a top 10 team. I'm looking at the poll. It says they're a top 10 team. I don't know what to tell you.
And it's on Twitter. That's where it matters.
They are a top 10 team. Ole Miss falls to Kentucky on a missed field goal. They don't call them Ole Make. They call them Ole Miss. So that makes sense there. And Miami struggling with Virginia Tech, a Virginia Tech team that did lose to a Vanderbilt team that Missouri beat. They only fall one spot. Ole Miss does fall a ways there, too, out of the top 10 with their loss to Kentucky. But Maggie, just thoughts on this college football weekend?
Successful bye week, in my opinion, in terms of,
I think they won, yeah.
Yeah, I think we won the bye week. We got a chance, to get a little bit more healthy. I know Marquise Johnson isn't going to be playing, but I think Drink said everybody else is going to be playing. And then you forgot about Utah. Utah got manhandled by Arizona, who just got manhandled by K-State. So, college football is so weird. But yeah, the teams that we don't play that were ranked ahead of us lost. And the teams that we do play won. So I think that there's no more successful of a bye week than you could have had.
Georgia falls 3 spots. We do have a new number 1. Alabama went all the way up to number 1 after their beating of Georgia. Maggie, we've talked about this already. This AP poll this year has been so reactionary. It has been just what happened that last week? Boom, let's make it immediately the immediate change in the AP poll. What have we had, 3 number 1 teams? We've had Georgia, we've had Texas, we've had Alabama as number 1.
Texas out of their spot is a little weird. I understand what they were doing because, you knock off top number 1 team, you're still below a 28-0 lead. So I'm not really sure why it was necessary. Maybe, Texas has still, Michigan's not great, but they're not terrible. So I don't know if I would have, I don't know if I would have necessarily bumped them out of the number 1 spot, but it's kind of like Eli talked about last week. Eli Hoff, our guest on this show, if you haven't listened to it yet. If this poll doesn't matter that much, but it still doesn't mean it's not frustrating because the minute I saw that Miami only fell 1 spot for struggling, and when I say struggling, kind of got bailed out of a losing situation where I don't know how you could even overturn that call, the catch in the end zone call that Virginia Tech had. If it's called on the field a touchdown, I'm not sure how you could have overturned it. But I'm just confused on how they win and they drop 1 spot and we lose in 2 weeks, we drop 5. I know it doesn't matter, and I know people are going to comment it doesn't matter. I get it, but it doesn't mean it's not frustrating.
Right. It is one of those things where you know that it doesn't matter, right? But it's still one of the things where, like, it doesn't matter, but I would still like it to reflect accurately.
Don't treat me the same way you're going to treat a Miami or a Oregon, I think that's just like in the something to prove motto. It's just like we always feel like we kind of had that something to prove. And have we looked like a top 10 team? I don't know. We didn't last year either, and we ended up a top 10 team. So I don't know.
That is true. It looks like, that Missouri, number 9 Missouri versus number 25 Texas A&M is the only ranked matchup again this week.
Yeah.
From Missouri. Yeah, Missouri, again, a standalone ranked matchup. And yet, where's College Game Day going? Oh, yeah, they're going to Cal.
That was actually, honestly, okay, because Cal lost their game the other day, or...
The Florida State, they lost.
Yeah, which...
Yeah.
Okay.
It's close. It's close.
Yeah. But I mean... This is another one of those things where I get they're trying to go to these new locations and it's supposed to be like whatever they want to treat these other schools the same. Maybe, I don't know,
right.
Pity party. I don't know. But why not Mizzou ever? It's crazy to me. I mean, I don't want them to go to A&M, and they wouldn't go to A&M anyways because A&M hosted the Notre Dame one. So we were already not going to get that, but it still just makes the Boston College one again frustrating and annoying, but whatever, have fun at Oakland.
Yeah, right. Yeah. So let's talk about Missouri, Texas A&M, because this is a game that is wildly interesting, and I think a game that has a lot of stakes going into it, too, for both teams. We can get into it a little bit from like the Texas A&M side with Billy, but before we get into the Texas A&M side, let's talk about this from a Missouri perspective, Maggie, because this is also their first road game of the season, too. Eli Drinkwitz mentioned that in his press conference, which is super fascinating. Just kind of the insight that he gave to, like, yeah, we have to travel and we haven't traveled yet. And these are a bunch of guys that haven't traveled together. And he's like, it kind of makes me, I'm paraphrasing here, he's like, it kind of makes me a little anxious about thinking about all these guys that haven't traveled together and how are we going to react to that in a traditionally hostile environment. I believe it's number 1. I know this doesn't like matter. Also, like, it's number 1 in terms of toughness to play in college football 25 at Kyle Field. So like the environment there is historically very good. Now, we have talked about a lot of this being an 11 a.m. kickoff on ABC. You're going to get the prime time sort of feel to this game, but not the prime time slot, if that makes sense. Just thoughts on just Missouri hitting the road for the first time against Texas A&M.
I think it's a decent opponent to have as your first road game. They're still kind of searching for an identity in their quarterback room between Marcel Reed and Connor Wegman, who Connor Wegman was their starter and got hurt, but Marcel Reed has started more games this year than Connor Wegman even has. So, I mean, there's a lot going on. Their defense is good. It's definitely the best defense that we're going to have faced so far.
Right.
But in terms of Kyle Field, and yes, it's a scary, big, scary environment. I'm glad it's an 11 a.m., like you said. But they're not really holding that much of an advantage at Kyle Field since they've joined the SEC. I mean, not even since the turn of the century, which that sounds like forever ago, but I mean, it kind of was. But since 2000, Mizzou's played really well in College Station. We have, I think, 4 out of the 6 wins that we have, games we've played there, we've won. So, I mean, that's not a terrible stat. They're 60-23 at Kyle Field since they joined the SEC, which is 72%, which is good. But then you look at their SEC opponents, and Texas A&M is 25-20 against ranked opponents. Or, I'm sorry, 25-20 against SEC opponents and 9-14 against ranked opponents. So, Yes, it's a big, scary environment, but is it that big of a home field advantage? I'm not sure I think so.
Looking at their schedule, too, they did just have a rock fight with Bowling Green at home. They only won by
Who else did Bowling Green give trouble?
Penn State.
Penn State, yep. They
might be pretty decent.
They might be a pretty good little group of 5 team.
They should win the MAC. I think they should win the MAC.
Yeah.
It if you're getting close games with A&M and Penn State, which Penn State looked pretty good against Illinois this last week. I mean, I think we expected them to beat Illinois, but I thought that game might have been a little bit closer, a little bit lower scoring than what it was. Was kind of impressed by that. But you mentioned just kind of how Missouri has done against Texas A&M. This is coming from the game notes that they have for Missouri. They faced off 16 previous times. Aggies hold a 9-7 advantage in the series. The Aggies claimed a 35-14 victory in Columbia during the team's most recent matchup, but Mizzou claimed 7 of the last 10 contests in the series dating back to 2002. A&M holds a 5-4 edge against Mizzou in College Station. So there is that as well. Looking at the broadcast, you're going to have Joe Tessitore on the mic with Jordan Rogers and Story Tanny. How do you say the last name?
I don't know how to say her last name. I just call her Stormy.
Yeah,
when I see it, I'm like, cool.
Stormy. That's what we got. But again, a very interesting matchup here. Is Maggie? We were kind of talking about before the podcast. This is our game, right? This is our game day here. The advanced stats have Texas A&M favored probably off of home field advantage. I think I saw 1.5 from College Football Insiders. But then you go look at the win probability, and like Missouri's favored in the win probability, and then you look at the Vegas books, and Missouri's the dog in the Vegas books, and it's really confusing. I think this game is going to be very close, obviously, but it's one of those things where I think it is a coin flip game, and how much does the home field advantage really come into play at 11 a.m. in a place that traditionally does love their night games? I don't know. That's going to be something to see. And one of the big factors in this game is going to be this Missouri offense. So, let's just talk about the Missouri offense because that was a big thing. We anticipated this Missouri offense to be more cohesive than it has been this season. And I think one of the big things is there's some guys up front that quite don't have the chemistry together, that don't quite have the reps that they've needed to have together to make Brady feel completely comfortable. Look, we're kind of seeing the same thing happen with the Kansas City Chiefs. If you're a Chiefs fan as well, there's a little bit of discomfort with Patrick Mahomes and his offensive line. I think you're kind of seeing the same like happy feet type of mentality and type of decision-making from Brady Cook as well. He doesn't feel totally comfortable back there. So that brings up the question, Maggie, like, what do you want to see from this offense going up against Texas A&M?
I mean, obviously, Brady has to hit some of those long balls. I mean,
yeah,
we talk about this a little bit with, we'll talk about it a little bit when Billy Liucci comes on, but that's one of their biggest issues is stopping the long ball. I think the second or third play of the game against Arkansas, they gave up a 60-something yard touchdown. They're having broken coverage issues. We're having broken coverage issues. So Brady Cook is going to have to be better there. And he's going to have improved over this bye week with that chemistry between his wide receivers, which should be there. They just need to get on the mark. We also have to be better on third downs in the red zone. We talked about this a little bit last week about how when the field gets smaller, we somehow forget how to play offense. Yeah. Between Vandy and Boston College, we went 3 for 10 in the red zone, which is not good. And then obviously against Vandy, missed those 3 field goals. So that's not helping at all, which leads me to special teams. They have to get better. You can't miss those chip shots and then make those 50 yard, 55 yards or whatever. Yeah. Like you have to be more consistent. So I'm hoping that, Blake Craig, he's calmed down a little bit because this is going to be a big environment. If he's kicking field goals, it's going to be hard. They have to score these touchdowns. They keep it out of, don't even make it a close game where field goals matter. Just score in the red zone. I know it's easy for me to say that this shouldn't be hard. Come on, it's it shouldn't be hard. I know it's more difficult than it seems, but they just have to have a better game plan for when they get it within the 20.
Yeah, I agree. I think one of the big things for me watching this Missouri offense is how do they approach this Texas A&M defense. They've got this is going to be the most athletic team they face. They've got dudes on this team. They've struggled against some teams that don't really have athletes. Like Boston College didn't have the athletes that they're going to face in the SEC. We talked about this last week. Vanderbilt is better than they have been, but they're going to go. I think Bud Elliott says this a lot. are going to go pro in something other than football. Like that's just what it happens with the Vanderbilt whole team. Really, this is going to be a team that's going to have dudes. They're going to have athletes. I want to see how they react to that. I kind of want to see the tempo of this Missouri offense. Do they try to add some tempo to it? Do they try to go quick? And I really want to see them activate the screen game a little bit more. They haven't ran a lot of screens. They haven't given Brady a lot of easy completions to get him going, get him in a rhythm. We haven't seen that a whole lot. And what we've seen in these games, too, is like a kind of a slower tempo. They went tempo a little bit against Vanderbilt, and they started to move the ball, but then they would stall out after they reached the 20. Like we saw that happen a little bit. So I wonder if they keep with the tempo. I want to see them easy screen passes, like whether it's Nate Noel, whether it's Luther Burden, Theo Weiss, any of them. Get the ball quick in your playmaker's hands, easy completions for Brady, because they're probably going to be playing that too high just to make sure that they don't get beat. You're doing those quick passes there. You're running the football. You're bringing those safeties down. Boom, that's when you hit them over the top. Like that's what I think that they got to do successfully on offense to really to make me feel good about the offense going into this SEC schedule. Now, look, we know it's not the strongest SEC schedule there is out there, but you can only play who they put on the schedule. Missouri has no control who they put on the schedule. That is all the SEC. The SEC tells them who they play. For the next 2 years, they're going to be playing who they play, right? So Missouri has no control over that. They can only play who is on their schedule, and you want to see them build confidence in Luther and Theo and Nate Noel. Look, Nate Noel's coming off a 199-yard performance. He played very well against Vanderbilt. They rode him, and arguably maybe should have rode him a little bit more in the red zone when they did do some of those Brady fake pitches when he dives up the middle just into a crowd of people. Usually those work too, but like, I don't know. It was weird. But I do think this Missouri offense needs to get those quick and easy things going to kind of build their momentum. Going towards the end zone, just build that momentum, build that confidence. That's what I think is kind of going to be the big key here. And the tempo, keep the tempo up, put the pressure on Texas A&M. You got to be on the front foot here in this game because I know we've talked a lot about just the environment and the home field advantage. If you can get them on their back foot early, it's going to be big for keeping the crowd out of it, for allowing you to have the upper hand in this game.
I think they have to kind of play similarly to how they always do when they like go to South Carolina, because that's a rowdy environment. But you're right, you got to get up and you can't let them back in. That's really the only way that you're going to manage this Texas A&M team, who, if anybody remembers, just a few years ago had one of the best recruiting classes.
Number one.
But it's one of the best recruiting classes we've really ever seen. And I know some people, Evan Stewart went to Oregon, and then you had Walter Nolan went to Ole Miss, but they still have a ton of talent from that recruiting class that are just kind of now finding their way, getting into those starting roles and making the impact, combined with some of the transfers they got, like Nick Scourton, who is the leading tackler in the Big Ten at Purdue. So they've got some dogs, and you have to get up and not let down.
100%. Let's talk about the Missouri defense now, because as they've been playing well. And I know some people will see the scores and be like, oh, you gave up, what was it, 20 points, 21 points to Vanderbilt? I can't remember off the top of my head what the score of that game was.
It was 27, 30-27.
30-27.
It was the same score as K-State last year, and that's how I remember that.
Oh, there you go. You gave up 27 points to Vanderbilt. Like, your defense couldn't have played that great. I see how some people could look at that, right? But they didn't allow points to be scored for 26 odd minutes or something like that in the middle of that game, from the second to, I think, pretty late in the fourth quarter. If Missouri makes, here's the other thing, Maggie, don't want to go back on that game. If Missouri makes like one or two of those field goals that Blake Craig missed, like, this game's not close.
No. Just
that's
don't miss all three of them. Just don't miss all three of them.
I think that's one thing Eli said.
Yeah, and here's like the crazy thing too is like one of them obviously hit the goalpost, and then the other one was a little bit controversial in the placement of it because
it went over the top of the goalpost. Yeah,
and you couldn't tell when you were there. I just saw the referees say no good and whatever, and then I get back and I'm like looking at these videos. I was like,
so I was in the south end zone. That's where I was sitting, And like I saw it, I was like, oh sweet, like I think he tucked that one in there, and then they're like, no good, and I was like, hang on,
sure. Yeah, I mean, they need to have more camera angles in all of football, college and NFL, because I'm always like, how did they not have a view of that? But you're right. Like you get those 2 field goals, and all of a sudden this is not really. And if you don't make the boneheaded mistake that we made at the end of the second half, where we're letting them immediately get the ball in field goal range, we're talking about a different game here. So yeah, I agree with you. I don't want to take anything away from Vandy, because I think that their trenches played really well, and obviously Potty is a good quarterback, but it should not have been. It should have maybe been at least a 10-point win and not no overtime. But we're sitting where we're sitting, and we can't change it. So
let's go back to the defense, because their defense ranks best in first downs allowed, or is among the best. They've worded this so weird, Maggie, as I'm reading the game notes. Ranks among the nation's best in first downs allowed at 2nd, total defense 3rd, passing yards allowed 5th, scoring defense 8th, and rushing defense 19th. So in the traditional rankings of Missouri's defense, they have been very good. And they've been getting turnovers too, and I think that's going to be crucial in this game against Texas A&M, where there is some quarterback, I don't want to necessarily say controversy, but there's some quarterback questions of who is going to be the quarterback. I think Wegman's still listed as a starter. Drinkwood said that in the press conference, but he's like, I don't buy that. He's like, I don't think he's going to be the starter. And I'm with him. I think it'll be Reed. That offense.
If you were smart, it would be Reed, because if you know anything about Mizzou's history with backup quarterbacks, anything about Mizzou's history against running quarterbacks, I mean, I would start him anyways. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah. That's what I personally would do, but I don't know. It's not like everyone's like, Mizzou's history with backup quarterbacks, unless you're a Mizzou fan. So,
yeah. And the D line has been playing good. I think the defense has been playing really well. We talk about the explosives, having to limit the explosives, but again, as we talk about with Billy coming up here in a little bit, like these teams are very similar in the ways that they have kind of won games so far this season, and in Texas A&M's case, lost games. But Missouri, I know a lot of Missouri fans chalk the Vanderbilt game up to a loss, but like it's a win in the win column, so it doesn't matter. It
keeps your season alive, and I think that's kind of like what I was gonna like kind of bring up about is who has more to lose in this game, because yes, Texas A&M lost to Notre Dame, a decent Notre Dame team. I wouldn't say that they're like
Notre Dame did lose to Northern Illinois, so
yeah, true, very true. That's one of those things about the weeks, and they barely draw. Aren't they still like a top 12 team or something?
Yeah, it's so dumb. They should.
It's so crazy. This is another one of those.
Notre Dame should not be able to make the playoff after losing to Northern Illinois. I don't care. Like the 12-team playoff, like as soon as you lose to a group of 5 team, take them out. You cannot make the playoff.
No, I totally agree. Especially in like that NIU team then turned around and lost to Buffalo, who beat 38-0. So here's the thing with A&M is they still have, though, they lost to Notre Dame, but they haven't lost an SEC game, so they're still alive. Like, they still have a lot to gain from this. They could win out. They don't play Georgia. They don't play Alabama. Like, no. And most of their hard games are at home. They have Mizzou at home. They have Texas at home. Obviously, they had Arkansas on the road. I think LSU at home as well, too. What'd you say?
Was the Arkansas game neutral site?
It was a neutral site, yep. And then Notre Dame at home. So their hardest games are at home. So they still have a lot to play for. Like,
100%.
We're not sitting here, this isn't like November and we're like, they're going to be checked out. So I still think Mizzou has a little bit more to gain as a top 10 team.
Yeah.
But I don't think Texas A&M just isn't going to show up,
I agree. So people in national media are already pretty down on Missouri just because of their performances against teams that, I had mentioned have maybe not actually been top 25 teams like Boston College and teams that don't really have athletes like Vanderbilt. So Missouri's already kind of down in the national opinion. So like if they go and they play well against a Texas A&M team that does have athletes that they got talent on that team. Whether that talent is going to translate to game days is a different story, but they've got talent. They've got dudes on that roster. It could really opened the eyes for a lot of people. If you're undefeated too, you got to be up there, right? Like that's the other thing too, is that, like, you got to be. You can't. I don't know how you would put. And we're talking about the college football playoff, and if Missouri is 11-1, I don't know how you put like a 9-3 Ole Miss over them.
No, you can't do it. I actually saw that on Twitter somewhere too, as somebody was like, 9-3 Ole Miss will get in over 11-1 somebody else, and I'm like,
Indiana.
I don't.
Yeah, it's Bud Elliott who said that. I thought that was absolutely ridiculous. Yeah,
and I think everything depends on the competition and who they're beating. Because if Ole Miss plays Georgia. I'm like, if Ole Miss goes 9-3 and doesn't beat any of their 3 toughest competitors, then I don't see how that's possible.
If Indiana loses one game, they're losing to Ohio State and beating Michigan at home. So like that is losing to Ohio State on the road and then beating Michigan at home. That would be like Indiana doesn't have a tough schedule either. So I do think that like the results are the results though at the end of the day. So like that's one thing. And I know that like you kind of talk out of both sides of your mouth when you talk about Florida State last year. I think Florida State's a completely different situation because they did lose their starting quarterback. Like I think that like that's a big part of why they didn't get in there. Yeah, they went 12-0. They played who they played. But like, I mean, look, if Missouri goes 12-0 and loses Brady Cook, I'm thinking,
what are you doing? Because we don't have.
I don't know. Yeah, like I don't know if this is a playoff team anymore. Yeah, Drew Pine. Yeah, sorry.
Yeah, I mean, it's definitely a game changer. And Drew Pine's played okay in the games that he's played, but I would understand the confusion of it all. Like, do we put this team in? Now, if Mizzou goes 11-1, their only loss is probably to Alabama in Tuscaloosa.
Yeah.
I don't know how you can leave them out, but...
Right. The number 1 team in the country right now, by the way. But
right, exactly. So, and I don't see how they won't be... If Mizzou can win this weekend, they have a good chance of going to Tuscaloosa undefeated.
Yeah.
And I mean, that could, be a massive, massive game. So I don't know. I don't see how at 11-1 you can leave most teams out, but I guess it depends on what the people around you do.
I still don't think that a loss here will take Missouri out of the conversation for the playoff, though, either.
But I think you have to beat Alabama in that sense.
Correct.
Like
I do think that Missouri can only win one, or can only lose one game, and with the schedule that they have, people are already trying to discredit what Missouri's done. Like it's already starting to happen, right? So if you give them more to talk about, like, oh, they lost to a Texas A&M team who lost to a Notre Dame team who lost to NIU, like type of deal, and they can follow a rabbit hole like that, pull strings out of, poke holes in the argument. That's what it's going to get tough. So just go on the road, just beat Texas A&M, take care of business, and look, you don't have to worry about anything if you do that. But anything else on Texas A&M, Maggie, before we take a break and talk to Billy?
No, I'm looking forward to it. Should be a good one.
Should be. It'll be a good one. And if you're going down to College Station, you can be suited and booted with our friends at Home Field Apparel. I'm still rocking the hoodie. I'm keeping my promise to wear the hoodie on every podcast until the Missouri Tigers lose. Maggie's got the Script Tigers, the Ringer tee. They got a lot of good Ringer tees there. I like that one. That one's a very solid one that I have in my closet as well. But go check them out, homefieldapparel.com. They're releasing some new polos. I don't know if you saw this, Maggie. They've got a new Mizzou pullover that's coming out, kind of like a silky satin type look of kind of like the starter jacket. Yeah. Oh, it looks nice. It looks clean. It looks nice. Go to homefieldapparel.com. You can get notifications on for that as well. You put in your email. You select Missouri as your team. They'll send you an email when it drops, when it comes out, so you can get that, so you can purchase it as soon as it gets here, and you don't have to worry about it selling out. So go do that, and you can use the offer code Mizzou24 for 15% off your first order at homefieldapparel.com. Go check them out. We love them. They make great stuff. You'll look really great when you're heading to Faroe or anywhere else in the SEC, repping the Missouri Tigers. So let's go ahead and take a break. When we come back, Billy Liucci with Tex Ags joins us.
Looking for tickets for your next event? Tickets for Less is your #1 source. Save big on every purchase when you use promo code KCSN at ticketsforless.com. Wouldn't it be nice to have a wireless provider that's straight up, with no BS, no complicated bills, fees, or upcharges? Well, with Mint Mobile, you can say bye-bye to your overpriced wireless plans, jaw-dropping monthly bills, and unexpected overages. Mint Mobile is here to rescue you with premium wireless plans starting at just $15 a month. All plans come with high-speed data and unlimited talk and text delivered on the nation's largest 5G network. And if you're worried about losing your phone or phone number or contacts, with Mint Mobile you can bring all of that over to join Mint Mobile's plan. Ditch overpriced wireless with Mint Mobile's deal and get 3 months of premium wireless service for just $15 a month. To get this new customer offer and a new 3-month wireless plan for just $15 a month, go to mintmobile.com/KCSNMTW. That's mintmobile.com/KCSNMTW. Cut your wireless bill to $15 a month at mintmobile.com/KCSNMTW. $45 upfront payment required, equivalent to $15 per month. New customers on first 3-month plan only. Speed slower above 40 gigabytes unlimited plan. Additional taxes, fees, and restrictions apply. See Mint Mobile for details.
All right, let's get into it. We got Billy Liucci on with us talking Aggies as Missouri heads to Texas A&M to take on, Texas A&M in a big matchup for both programs. Billy Liucci joining us, executive editor and co-owner of TexAgs.com. Billy, thanks for joining us.
Absolutely. Good to be here. Maggie and I have been trying to do this for a few weeks now, so it's good. We perfect timing, actually, for this one. Better than the preseason, right, Max?
Yeah, better than the preseason. I did try to get Billy on for the preseason because we started doing our podcast a little earlier this year.
Yeah.
And he was like in Nantucket or something. I'm like, what are you doing in Nantucket, Billy? And then this week does work a lot better. But
I've got to enjoy, as you guys know, you've got to enjoy the off season. And for Texas A&M this year, I want to explain to you all my off season. And this is not bragging, it's the opposite, with one exception, which was Omaha. But it's an off season that included a head football coach firing, very high profile, a head coach hiring, all the portal stuff that goes with that, all the assistant coaching hires that follow that. Then we had an AD leave, and then you had an AD search. You had a March Madness, March Madness run. I wouldn't call it run. They went out in the second, but I mean SEC tournament, NCAA tournament. Then baseball went to Omaha, and you had like 12 days of that. That was basically, went into late June. And I'm trying to think, there was something else that I'm forgetting that typically you don't deal with in an off season that A&M went through.
It wasn't you on the Netflix special or anything, right?
Right.
That was the
Last off
the previous
You
summer.
just never know what you're going to be doing. I just never know. I'm like, oh, shoot, Billy's on something. I didn't even know you were in that. I'm like watching it, and I'm like, you didn't tell us you were in this. I like sent a screen.
I was too worried about my hair to tell it, to say too much. I was like, gosh, I'm just going to pretend it's not me if it comes out that bad. But no, so it was a crazy off season. And like you said, we were trying to get together. Then it was SEC media days, and it was like,
yep, man,
I've got 2 weeks to fit in vacation here. So maybe doing that this week in the bye week. And you're either going to be, I don't know, guys. Y'all tell me. I feel like this is a really significant game for both teams, different reasons. Year one of a head coach and this Missouri team that if they, I think either team looking at Sunday coming off of a win is going to be feeling really, really good about where they're at.
I think so. It's going to be a big game for both programs. Look, we've talked a lot on the podcast that Missouri hasn't played like a top 10 team, but hey, look at the AP poll. They got a little number that's less than 10 on by their name, and it does help that like teams above them did lose, obviously with Ole Miss and everything like that.
Yeah.
This is a big game that we've talked about, Maggie, you and I, of just how this will dictate, kind of like the K-State game did last year. Like this will kind of dictate how good Missouri's season is going to be, just based off of if they can go into a hostile environment like College Station is, pull out a win. Now, granted, it is at 11 a.m. on ABC. Maybe not the slot that I think Texas A&M fans or Missouri fans really would have wanted for this game, but it's a good time slot on a primetime network for on the road. It could be a tough test for Missouri, but Billy, the first question I kind of want to ask you is just about the quarterback position. I think that's kind of the biggest question around this team. I think just from an outsider's perspective, watching Texas A&M play, Marshall Reed has ran the offense, it seems, a lot better than Connor Wegman has. I think the way that they have this offense going kind of fits with what Colin Klein, we up here in Missouri, we're kind of pretty close to K-State and seeing what they're doing adjacent wise. Like his offense did pretty well with the running quarterback. Having Marcel Reed in there seems like it's doing pretty well for Colin Klein and company.
Well, and Colin Klein kind of dealt with something similar last year. I don't know how much injury, but between going with Avery Johnson and now they're I guess the guy that started last year, right, is at Ohio State. So watching that back and forth, so he's at least familiar with it. Here's the one thing I would say, and I'm a huge Marcel Reed fan, and I've always been a fan of Connor. I'm talking about them as young men, as kids, right. But Marcel has brought a different energy. He's brought that running threat that you talk about. He's brought just kind of this youthful vibe to it where it's all new. But I've been so impressed with his attitude, his demeanor in the fourth quarter, these last couple games, how he attacked his first career start at the Swamp a few weeks ago. He's shown so much maturity-wise. You can tell he's a head college football coach's son. Even when the passes aren't being completed, they went 3 and out a bunch of times in a row in that Arkansas game. He was fine. I'm watching his body language on the field, on the sideline. He's fine. Like, he's so poised and composed. But I do think there is this, and this is where Elko and Colin Klein's decision will end up having to be made. And I know people are speculating all this complete nonsense online, and I'm talking about within the A&M fan base more so than anywhere, about Wigman's status. And I'm like, guys, like, it's a shoulder injury. Some people can come back from that in 2 weeks, some 4, some 6, but he is going to return able to play. And all the other stuff is not true. It's not accurate. He is going to return able to play, and it's going to be sooner than later. They've got a bye coming up after this one too, by the way. So the decision is coming. It's coming fast, and it's going to be, do you play the guy that has kind of lit a fire under this offense or given it, reason for hope, let's say, but also A&M punted 9 times on 11 possessions Saturday against Arkansas. I'm not counting a 10-yard field where they scored the touchdown where it's kind of impossible to punt, hopefully. Yeah. But 9 out of 11 drives ended in punt. And I was still impressed with how Marcel played. But it's not like, they scored 26 against Bowling Green. It's not like the offense is just lighting the world on fire. So there's all these positives with Marcel. But then they're looking at Connor Wigman, I think it's fair to state, differently than I think other people are. And maybe you guys, who have just watched this season, because all you've seen from Connor Wigman is him have his worst career game against Notre Dame. A good Notre Dame defense, his first game to play in basically a year, I think about more than 11 months. And he struggled. And he struggled early, and he looked bad, and he looked out of sorts. Then he got hurt in that game. So they had all of camp, all of spring ball, and all the tape that went with all that to make a decision. And Connor was the guy wire to wire in the offseason. There's a reason Klein and Elko picked him. Now, I think Marcel has exceeded on-field expectations. In other words, he's like ahead of schedule. And I think that's what makes this thing tough. And they also have been winning. So when Connor does return, and it's a when, it's not an if, that I do think it's a tough decision. And I know the easy thing to say is that they're winning and Marcel looks good, and both of those things are true. But the passing game needs to continue to, if they're going to win off the running game, guys, and quarterback play and defense, in my opinion. So the passing game has got to be good enough to get guys out of the box so they can run the football more. So we'll see. I do love what Reed's doing, though, because I think the kid just knows how to win. Yeah. He knows how to lead a football team.
I think for me personally, like we went through this last year with Mizzou in like early quarterback issues. And I mean, we're having some right now, but I mean, Brady Cook's our quarterback. Like, there's no question. He's also, not hurt. So it's a little bit of a different situation. But we kind of had to tell Mizzou fans this last year. Coaches get paid a lot of money. They're not dumb enough to not put the best quarterback on the field. I hope they're not dumb enough to do that, like, in most situations.
Yeah.
But, like, I mean, obviously, like, everybody kind of knows what went on with Jimbo Fisher, like, all this talent, and, like, it just, it didn't pan out. But he was still putting the best players on the field to try to make that happen. I think that's going to be the same with Elko. I really actually like Elko a lot. I think that was a great hire. I like what he did at Duke. I just think that he's a good dude. I watched his press conference before this, and I was like, oh, man, I kind of actually really like him. Yeah. But I just don't see them putting, Marcel back there if they think that Connor is 100% ready to go.
Yeah, it's gonna be interesting. Like I said, I don't think you can go wrong. I think you've got two really good options, and I think the interesting thing is if they're both healthy, how long do you go with either if they're not playing well? And that's the thing you want to avoid, is that week to week back and forth stuff. And I trust these guys that they've shown me more than enough to believe that they're going to make a decision, stick with it, and have it planned. And it might be, that second half of the season might be, I think it could be interesting at the position. But I'm telling you, Marcel Reed versus Cook would be a fascinating matchup on Saturday, because I don't know where y'all stand with this Missouri team, but I think, first of all, Drink's a hell of a coach. I think he's a hell of a coach. I like him. I like his non-back down factor. I like all of that. I love what keeps standing out to me is A&M played Tennessee last year, and I was like, man, these teams are not that good. Like Tennessee, it was physical, and there was really good players on each side, but I was like, in Knoxville, that wasn't good football. And I think it was a week later, it might have been 2 weeks later, that beat down that Missouri put on Tennessee was an eye-opener for me in terms of that is a well-coached, highly motivated, talented football team to do that to Tennessee. Even though I didn't think they were that great, like, I saw the talent. I do think Heupel's a good coach, very good coach. That caught my attention as much as anything, even more so than the bowl game, because of all, you just never know who's playing, who's not, who's motivated. That game, I was like, okay, more than any, actually. So I'm not lulled to sleep because I do think the Missouri team that beat Boston College, who's not any good, I don't care. They beat Florida State. No offense to our friend Mags, but they're awful. And you notice I've been quiet to her after taking 6 years of abuse during Jimbo on Twitter. I've been very quiet. Haven't said one thing until just now. They're awful. And so Boston College to me is no good. Vandy is a better version of Vandy, but they're not good. Missouri's been ahead by 6 points combined at the end of regulation, those last two games at home. Okay? That's what I see. What I know is how good those skill position guys are at Mizzou. I know how well coached that football team is. I know their quality defense. They're going to be, if they come in there as that football team that played in those two games, A&M will win Saturday. I do not expect that football team to show up here after a bye week. I think they're going to get top 10 Missouri, whether they're the 8th best team in the country or the 12th, I don't know, but top 10 level Missouri is what A&M's going to have to get past on Saturday if they want to improve to 5-1. And it is a tough matchup because to me, I don't think Mizzou's great on defense, and y'all correct me if I'm wrong, but I think they're good. I think they have the potential to be great on offense. And if they are, that's a tough matchup for an A&M team that's going to try to, not try. You want to win every game by a lot, but you're going to kind of, your winning formulas in that 24-20 type of range. And it might be tough to keep that game in that area if Mizzou has kind of put it together during that bye week, because they haven't looked good. But guess what? A&M eked by Bowling Green, A&M eked by Arkansas, so they're kind of in the same boat.
It's one of those things, too, where the Missouri defense has started slow, but has really adjusted. After the first 2 drives, they really adjust, they really lock down, they strap down. And that was the unit coming into the year that we thought we would see the most struggles with. Between Maggie and I, you're facing a lot of turnover. A lot of the guys on that defense last year are now playing on Sundays. That's kind of what happens. And you're getting a new defensive coordinator. There's a couple position coach changes there. You got some transfers trying to gel, and that's been probably the unit you feel a little bit more confident in. But coming into the season, you were kind of anticipating the Missouri offense to shoulder a lot of that load. They've started off really slow, and so that's one of the sides of the ball that I'm really focused on. I think for this upcoming matchup is Texas A&M's defense versus Missouri's offense, because that's one of the matchups. I think Maggie, even in our season preview when we were talking about this game, that was the one that we were circling anyway, because Texas A&M, good defense, that. Got to see Missouri's offense kind of click it into gear there. But so, Billy, what are your thoughts on kind of that side of the ball?
I think the defensive line has been really good all year, as advertised, with all that NFL talent. I think Saturday was the first weekend we saw them just dismantle and destroy an offensive line. What they did to Arkansas was bad. It was brutal. It was from start to finish. And if you really look at Arkansas's game, and I don't think that's not an explosive offense or not a consistent offense, because Taylor Green is not a consistent passer.
Right. But
it's Bobby Petrino. Taylor Green, it will kill you running and extending plays if he can, and he will do that. They've got a great running back in Jaquin Jackson, and they've got some pretty good receivers in Armstrong, Satania, and Tesla, and some tight ends. So there are real weapons, and Bobby Petrino's calling the shots. They stink on the O-line, and Texas A&M absolutely throttled those guys in the trenches, and it was not competitive. It was not remotely competitive. In fact, first play of the game, 5-yard tackle for loss. Last play of the game, same guy, Nick Scorton, sack, fumble. They dominated wire to wire. The 2 touchdowns Arkansas scored were on like a 3rd and, long on a busted play. But not busted play, but Green did a great job of escaping 3 rushers. He should have been sacked. 75-yard touchdown. The next drive, they're facing 4th and long, 4th and 15. They run a fake punt for 25 yards. Those are their 2 biggest plays of the game. They both led directly to touchdowns. They were that close to not happening. And if you think that A&M actually stopped Arkansas on their second drive and they were punting, had they actually punted or stopped the fake punt, their last 12 drives of the game would have produced 3 points. So that defensive front is nasty. And if Mizzou's got any weaknesses up front, they'll exploit that. Where A&M has to prove a lot, I think, on Saturdays on the back 7 against these receivers. Burden, Theo, Mookie, and Brady Cook and the running game. They're going to have to prove that they can keep y'all's running game from getting leverage on the outside, which you love to do. And they're going to have to prove that they can keep guys from getting open in the back 7. They did a good job of that last weekend with that one big exception, but they haven't been tested at all like they will. Look, Notre Dame doesn't attack down the field. Florida was trying this Mertz-Lagway experiment that they probably would have been a lot better off going with just Mertz. And then we just talked about Arkansas and then Bowling Green. And Bowling Green had some open dudes. So I do think the tests have gotten a little tougher each week, and they'll do so again with Missouri. But this is the best offense A&M will have faced. It's certainly the best balance run pass. So I think this is a test for the Aggie secondary this week. And that's going to be, I promise you, Drink is going to test that out. And their formula to victory is going to involve consistently hitting plays in that intermediate down the field range. And then also just they're going to try to get easy yards against this defense in those the quick passing games. So that's going to be the chess match is Elko versus Drink in terms of when Missouri has the ball. Is like how much of this is going to look like bend but don't break, how much of it is going to look like try to break Brady Cook and the quarterback in terms of getting to him when they do take those shots down the field and need protection.
So Mizzou and A&M, I feel like kind of both struggle at the same things. The games necessarily, like you said, haven't been that close, but in the 2 Power 4 games that Missouri's played, so Boston College and Vanderbilt, they've given up 4 busted coverage touchdowns. I mean, that's 28 points right there. And I know everybody wants to sit here and be like, those games were so close. They weren't that close, to be honest with you. Like, in terms of yardage, if you watch it, third down conversions, like, they're really not that close, but we've given those up, as has A&M. So, like, our whole thing in the bye week was that Brady Cook has to be able to make some of those long passes. And then seeing that that's kind of been a little bit of a struggle for A&M as well, I can also see them trying to take some of those shots a little bit early on.
Yeah. And look, the risk you run is when you try to take those shots, you set Cook up for, that defensive line is, it's the real deal. There's no question. I think when they're all good to go, I think it's as good as any, probably in the country, certainly in the SEC. I mean, obviously you've got the Georgias and the Bamas, but I think up front and the 4 guys that line up on the field up there, 4 or 5 up front, they're as good as anybody in the country, including those teams. And I think NFL scouts would that watch these teams would tell you as much. I mean, they're that good. So, you've got to be strategic in how you do it, and it's all about momentum and stuff. But like you said, Mizzou's given up big plays that have made games appear closer and things like that, and so was A&M. And the one game they lost, they gave up 2 big plays to Notre Dame that cost them the football game. They gave up a 45-yard run where it was – yeah, and the Aggies wanted him badly. I think it was A&M. Was it A&M, Missouri, and Notre Dame down the stretch?
Yeah, we also wanted him badly.
Yeah, so it was. But that play, actually, that was not Jeremiah Love on the 46. He scored the game-winning touchdown, which was also a great run. Where A&M just had a bust on that one. On the other one, it was a linebacker versus the running back in space. He made one guy, and so 2 busts. Or we're probably talking about 2 undefeated teams right now, and probably College game day. So it is the big plays allowed have hurt A&M. They haven't made enough of them offensively themselves. I do think that's starting to kind of balance out, but that'll be put to the test this weekend. Like you said, something's got to give on one of these 2 defenses is going to stop giving them up. You think?
Yeah, you would think. Yeah, hopefully. Billy, appreciate your time hanging out with us here. We know you got an Astros game to get. You don't want to hold that up with playoff baseball going on in Kansas City and in Houston down there. We'll be locked in there, but appreciate you coming on talking Missouri, Texas A&M.
All right, thanks, guys. Appreciate y'all.
Thanks,
all right.
Billy.
Thanks, Mag. See y'all. Good luck this weekend. I'm a little disappointed you're not going to be here.
We'll chat about it.
Yeah, I will be holding that against you.
All right, that's good. Mizzou That 2 podcast. We will talk to you guys next week, hopefully after Missouri Tigers win.